Welcome. Thanks for joining our webinar, Leverage Intelligent Automation to Transform Clinical Research, presented by Arria and Glemser. My name is Philip Edgar, and I'll be your host for today's agenda. Today's agenda will kick off with a little context around who we are as individual professionals and organizations, including our focus as a team. We will have the opportunity to hear about current trends in clinical research and frame a key challenge facing clinical and life science teams. With an understanding of the challenge in mind, we'll also cover how you can leverage intelligent automation, and you'll see our short COVID and CSR NLG demonstration. Finally, we will close out with some time for Q&A, so let's meet the experts. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to one of our speakers today, Ray Glemser of Glemser Technologies. Ray brings over 30 years of experience in solving complex problems within the life sciences. Amongst Ray's capabilities, he has experience in global process harmonization, FDA regulatory compliance, computer systems validation, and content management systems. Joining Ray today is Kathy Herbert of Arria NLG. Kathy brings decades of experience in technology design and implementation across verticals that include the life sciences. Kathy currently serves as Arria's Senior VP of Customer and Partner Enablement, where she has the opportunity to work every day with customers on their intelligent automation and NLG journeys. I'm Philip Edgar of Arria NLG also, and I've had the pleasure of spending more than 20 years taking innovative technologies to market globally. I specialize in helping companies define and implement digital transformation strategies and have significant experience across business intelligence analytics, robotic process automation, enterprise mobility management, and intelligent automation, including NLG. With introductions complete, let me tell you a little bit about Arria and Glemser and the value we aim to offer through our collaborative partnership. Arria NLG is the recognized global leader in the field of natural language generation, or NLG, specializing in extracting insights from complex data sources, and communicating that information in natural language. The Arria NLG Research Centre is located at Scotland's University of Aberdeen, with primary business offices in the United States and regional offices in cities worldwide. Our chief scientists, Professor Ehud Ryder and Dr. Raji Sripada, are two of the leading figures internationally in the NLG space. They mentor a team that includes 10 PhDs in artificial intelligence disciplines such as NLG and data science, and software engineers and developers. Glemser has over 30 years experience in serving life sciences clients by assuring product quality, improving regulatory compliance, and gaining operational efficiencies that reduce costs. With innovative methods and technologies, the Glemser way is based on a wealth of knowledge and experience in helping life sciences companies develop industry-leading IT solutions and services throughout North America, Europe, and Asia. Arria and Glemser are proud to have built this partnership, but how does it help? The collaborative capabilities of Arria and Glemser allows us to deliver intelligent automation that transforms your data into powerful narratives that are already built on a compliant foundation. We aim to understand your processes and business, then focus in on the most time-consuming and error-prone elements of your critical workflows to identify candidate areas for intelligent automation. Our goal is empowering you to better understand growing data sets more quickly, improving analysis, output accuracy, and compliance, and to ultimately help you gain faster regulatory approval, as we will see in the upcoming demonstrations. I'd like to now invite Ray Glemser to share some insights on trends and the key challenge seen in clinical research organizations. Ray?
Thank you, Philip. This is an exciting time to be in clinical research. Scientific breakthroughs are gaining traction now, specifically in synthetic RNA and DNA components that really help target COVID-19. And there's a promise to expand these into tunable therapies for additional diseases. Also, genetic testing of rare diseases is opening up to broader applications. In the areas of study design, studies are moving away from discrete phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 testing and are going to more toward targeting development questions in a rolling manner. There's also increased monitoring of all the performance of participants in the study and the impact they have on the results to improve efficiency. The high cost of drugs and data security and privacy breaches have been a regular feature of news reports. So governments and regulators have been really focused on trying to lower drug prices and keeping information secure. And many of the elements of technology platforms and huge amounts of data are currently available today. The key trend in this area is to connect the technology to the massive data intuitively and efficiently. And although technology and data is really a separate trend, it really underlines all or supports all of the trends above here. So the biggest challenge, if you could really summarize it in clinical studies, is to really figure out a way to do more with the same or fewer people. And that's really based on the increased costs that we have in terms of professionals in the field, in the areas of medical writers and data scientists, and the increased complexity there is with this data and the processes that we have. So a real focus on efficiency. What's happening also very exciting for clinical trials is the whole world now knows about how clinical trials works as we follow nightly the COVID-19 and the race that different companies have to try to find the right vaccine for this. And Arria has a tracking dashboard that's available on the Arria website, which we'll talk about a little later, that uses the same technology. So all of this really is about speed and cost and efficiency, and really driven by the data and regulatory compliance. Before we move on to the technical aspects of this demonstration, I just want to call your attention to a client who has worked with us already in this. And as you can see from this quote, the real benefit is Arria's solution with speed and efficiency for AstraZeneca.
Great, thank you, Ray. As Ray noted, having to do more with the same or even less resources, the increasing size and complexity of data, and the decreased timelines to submit to regulatory authorities can be a challenge. The Arria Glemser approach takes on that challenge with a focus on three areas: compliance, efficiency, and scale. Compliance is the foundation. We always start with compliance in mind. Our narrative design gives you powerful control to generate compliant results at any stage of your workflow. Building on our foundation of compliance, we focus our attention on efficiency via automation to take advantage of increased speed to results. Today, more than ever, it is critical to leverage automation to accelerate your outcomes. And finally, with compliance and efficiency in place, organizations can benefit from economies of scale to meet increasing or changing global demand. And certainly something we see a great deal of today. Our approach is built with flexibility in mind. Our technology suite provides for broad and robust integration points across the entire enterprise organization, allowing you to choose the best way to realize the benefits of intelligent automation and NLG. We take a non-invasive approach that aims to leverage and increase the value of your existing technology stack to quickly start to see results. Our flexibility is one of our core strengths as we aim to help your organization implement automated narrative output built on compliance, efficiency, and with the ability to scale. I'm very excited to have Cassie show you a short demonstration before we take some time and move into our Q&A session. Cassie?
Okay, great. Let me start with the data. So the first thing we're going to show you is some of the work that we've done around the COVID-19 reporting. And we started with Johns Hopkins data, and they give you data in multiple different formats. You can get multiple files of data, or you can sort of get one long file with time series. And the important thing here is Arria could work with the data in whatever format it was in. So we didn't have to have it in a single row. We can just take the data in, process the data, and generate narrative. And that's why I'm starting by showing you the data. So when I look at this data, and it goes all the way from January all the way to where we are today in June. And what we really wanted to do in this narrative is grab the days that are important to us to be able to tell the story, send that to Arria, and Arria will send back a response. So rather than looking at this, let's look at the dashboard and see what it's able to do for consumers. Now, what's interesting about this, and let me go out to, so if we go out to Arria.com, and I invite you to do this, you can see that we've stood up a dashboard. And in this dashboard, what we really wanted to be able to share with people is from a global perspective, what's happening from a cases perspective, what's happening from a deaths perspective, but not only what's happening today, what's happening this week versus what happened last week, because the narratives change. And now the narrative is we've opened up. So are things getting better? Are they getting worse? What things are changing? What things are happening? So we chose to build a really flexible narrative that gives you the ability to, quickly understand and order things from a case perspective. So we can look at all countries from a case perspective. But if I wanted to see countries that week over week are having the greatest increase in cases, right? The user can put input in the narrative, and the narrative is going to automatically come back with the areas that are seeing the most growth. So really, really valuable. The other thing that's really important when you look at NLG, and it's certainly important to me and it's certainly important to all of us, is what's happening in my community. So how do I get that big piece of data into something that's really relevant in my life? And so we looked at this as well, and we give the user the ability to determine how many things they want to understand. Do I want to just look at the top 5 or the top 10? Do I want to look at all states? Or do I want to let Arria decide? Now, let Arria decide is a really interesting concept, and it came from working with financial customers. And when a human analyst looks at what are they going to talk about, in their head, they're really doing math to determine what's materially important to my reader. So let Arria decide uses a standard deviation to determine how many states are really relevant in given today's data. Tomorrow I might look at it and it may come up with a different set of states that are really the driving force or driving factor. So I live in Pennsylvania, I work in New Jersey, but if I were to choose Pennsylvania, now I can get really personalization at scale. So I can not only take a look at, I can take a look at who has the greatest number of cases, and if I want to see my area, I'm going to select all because I actually live in Bucks County, but you can get some insight into what's happening from a growth perspective. And we can look through different states and see how they're doing. So, really, really interesting analysis. So the key point here is personalization at scale to your user, and the ability to take data in the format it's in, send it to Arria Studio, and have Arria come back with a narrative. The other piece of work that I think is extraordinary was done by TIBCO, and they really went to not just talk about deaths and cases, but they wanted to be able to give insight on things like what are the effective reproduction estimates. So I tracked this really closely just because we've worked with TIBCO on generating this narrative, but to the layman, the fact that my effective reproductive number, if I just looked at the number, I wouldn't really know what it means. So we were able to add verbiage around that made it more apparent to the layman what's going on. So we built a rule that if the number is greater than 1.0000, then my disease is spreading, right? If it's 1.00, it's stable. And if it's less than 1, the disease is not spreading, right? So what we're able to do is look at the data and build a narrative based on that. So if we look at global estimates, right, we've got lots of great graphs, but what we give you the ability to do is an interactive dashboard experience. So you can select the country that you're interested in, and it will take the data in and it'll look across the data, and it's going to tell us that Slovakia is the most infective country within Europe with 2.14 infection rate. It gives a really great description of what that means, which is one person infects 2.14 on average. So what we were able to do is put context around the data to make it easier to understand. So if I wanted to click to North America, I can. So you can see the interactive experience that you get from working in the dashboard. It's going to give me the most infectious as well as the least infectious. But if I wanted to look at a particular area, right, I can look at a particular area and really dive into things that important messages about effective reproduction. So the other, we've done a number of things with this dashboard, but the other one that seems to be really interesting to people is understanding what the story is around government interventions. And so I think TIBCO did an incredible job on this as well. If we look at world countries, getting some insight into what they've done from a, we hear a lot of news narrative on, if we opened, if we closed things sooner, what would have happened? But I think TIBCO does a really good job of collecting data so that we know, when things happened and what was going on at the time the closures took place. So, we thought the interesting narrative around that is that, from a US perspective, we have 13 government interventions, between a 2-week period. And during that time, we grew from 11 cases to 3,774. So, a fairly small amount of cases when that had been identified when all of the, when all of the lockdowns were put in place. As we start to open up, you'll see that we'll add that lifting has taken place. So if I go to somewhere like Switzerland, right, they've begun to open up some things. And if we look at the graph that's been created, we can see that they have begun to lift some of the interventions that they put in place. The other interesting thing about this chart is that when we talked to TIBCO about what they had done, they said, well, we have a, restrict inbound travel. But if you look at restrict inbound travel in the US versus Switzerland versus some other country, it may have a different meaning or description. So it was a really important piece of work that when we put this chart, we were able to give more detail and more information on what that actually means. So I think that's really interesting. And I invite people on this call to go out to both of these sites. The other area I wanted to show you focused on pharmaceutical and clinical. And let me just go out to my pharma demo, is that we have done a fair amount of work with clinical safety reporting with clients. And what we know is that you're collecting lots of data. So let's take a look at some of the data that's going to go into a clinical safety report. We also know that these reports, you've got a very short period of time to implement the reports. So I'm going to go ahead and select adverse events, concomitant medications, demographics information, and medical history, because that's all the data that you're looking at when you create these reports. And say you've got 10 days to put 100 reports together. Now we can select the data, select open, and determine what are the important areas that I want to talk about. And now we've just loaded all of that data in, and I'm going to generate my report. And that generates my clinical safety report. Now, I think it's really important to mention that the medical writer is at the heart of this process. So I talked about, from an artificial intelligence perspective, it's really understanding why you talk about what you talk about when you talk about it. How you look at a MEDRA file to understand whether an adverse event is important to talk about or not important to talk about. Those are the things that when we're working with a pharmaceutical, we talk to that medical writing group on, what are the business rules that are in place when you're actually writing these reports so that we can get to the dynamic generation. Once you've created a template, clinical safety report within our system, you can copy that, and for every study that's coming out, tweak it. So you create your first base model, and then I might have my oncology version, and so on and so forth. So really, really powerful. One of the things that we were told in working with pharmaceuticals is being able to take the exact same data and understanding what are the exceptions that are occurring with my data is a really insightful thing. So if I take the same data, I'm going to take CSR data check, I'm going to load in some data, and now for every subject, I can identify data that's missing. Because one of the things we learned when we were working with some of our pharmaceutical clients is that, one, there's high value in being able to run these processes and get sample reports before you've closed the trial so you can understand how things are going. It's also really important to understand, are there anomalies in my data? Have we just said that a 10-month-old child has, a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, which we know probably means that the date of birth is wrong, right? So there are things that we can do with that data, not only around generating the report, but also identifying any issues that come to play. I'm going to open up the lines in just a second, but I also think it's worth mentioning that Arria also, as you saw with the AstraZeneca quote, we also play a major role in financial reporting. We do a lot of consumer and sales reporting as well. So how are my products doing? And as compared to other products that I'm competing with. So where you have data and where you're looking to create insightful narrative, that's really where we fit within the process. So I'm going to ask Ray a question, and then I think so Ray, now that we've talked about the whole clinical safety reporting, how would you validate a solution like this? What are the things that go into that?
That's a great question, Kathy. We do hear a lot from clients concerned about validation as they adopt innovative solutions like this and move to the cloud. And it turns out that applying validation to Arria's solution is pretty straightforward. Our approach starts with the supplier audit and planning and includes a risk-based approach to requirements and making sure we get the level of testing at the right detail. The key overall is to adapt to the software development methodology, and there are several we can use in the implementation up front to get the right validation document all along the way. And of course, we can adapt these validation documents to whatever the individual client needs are. So it's actually relatively straightforward to make sure that this cloud-based solution is validated properly. Kathy, I went to Arria's website to track the effects of the pandemic where I lived, and I wanted to know what considerations went into designing Arria's COVID-19 dashboard.
Yeah, Ray, the first thing we looked at was the available data sources and what format the data was coming in, and then really identified what story we wanted to get out of that data, right? To make sure that there's a fit. We actually call that corpus analysis. So we found the Johns Hopkins data, and we also played with New York Times data, and we've written many models against many data sets. You know, we felt like that data set really met our need. And then it's really understanding what the story is. So the first version of that dashboard we came out with, we weren't talking about being able to sort over percentage of change week over week, right? It was a different story in March when we released the dashboard. And I think that's part of the power of Arria is we can take the same data and we can evolve the story as the narrative rightly changes over time.